Hey, wake up, please. In the casket, my husband Bob had his usual gentle face. It feels like he would wake up any moment when I call out to him. Well, I'm off. Brightly, he had said to me and our daughter, Catherine, just 2 days ago before leaving for a business trip. I never imagined that would be the last time I'd hear Bob's voice. I never saw it coming. My husband, Bob, took his own life. No matter how much I called out to him, there was no way the now cold as ice Bob would respond. Yet, I just couldn't bring myself to believe this situation. That's when I noticed a single photo placed near Bob's chest. It was a family photo I didn't recall placing there. Who on earth put this picture here? Puzzled, I picked up the photo and turned it over to find the message, "Get out now, Des," written on the back. I felt a shiver down my spine, and as I turned around, I met the cold gaze of my mill staring at me. At that moment, I had no idea about the nightmarish days that awaited me. My name is Angel, and I'm 32 years old. When I was in college, my parents tragically passed away in a car accident, leaving me utterly alone and devastated. During those tough times, John, who I was dating then, supported me and we got married right after graduation. Together, we had a blissful life with our 8-year-old daughter, Emily. My in-laws consisted of my mill and my brother-in-law. My Phil passed away from an illness a year ago. He fell ill and suddenly passed away, leaving the entire family in shock. It turned out to be a heart attack. My in-laws were quite wealthy, owning a successful business, so money was never an issue. Before he passed, my Phil had thought of appointing his kind and knowledgeable younger son, my husband, as the next CEO. However, his untimely death led to the elder son, my Bill, taking over the reins. Dad did mention wanting me to succeed him, but I couldn't overshadow my brother. "I'll support him all the way," my husband often said. He deeply admired his elder brother and had no objections to him taking the CEO position. My Bill has always been warm and friendly, often striking up casual conversations, making him quite approachable. However, I've always found my Mill a bit challenging, and we don't interact much these days. When we first got married, she'd cook with me, saying things like, "I'm glad we can do this together since I don't have a daughter." She was very kind. But after my Phil passed away, she became distant and cold. She started avoiding both my husband and me, hardly making eye contact, and acted as if we were invisible. Even with her beloved granddaughter, Emma, whom she used to adore, she'd glare and distance herself when Emma called out for Grandma. It breaks my heart to see my husband, who remembers how loving she once was, so downcast. Something's off with Mom. It's like she's treating me like an enemy, glaring at me. Does she think I'm after the family's assets? Or could it be an illness or something? He wondered. My husband pondered his mother's drastic change, but he couldn't think of a reason. Come to think of it, the first time we noticed a change in her was after the 7th-day memorial service for my Phil, when we stayed at the family's home. After the memorial, we were so exhausted that we slept soundly. However, in the morning, we realized our bag with our change of clothes was missing. A thief, maybe. No, it's strange that only our bag is gone. Let's search around. As we looked around, we noticed smoke rising from the backyard through a window. With a sinking feeling, we headed outside, only to find our belongings being burned. And there, near the burning items, stood my Mill. "Mom, please tell me you didn't do this. Mill, please answer us." However, she didn't respond at all. Furthermore, her eyes were wide open, and her lips were pale white. Her hands were trembling, and she looked frightened. "Mom, why would you do something like this? What didn't you like about us?" Though my husband was clearly perplexed by her silence, he gently spoke to his Mill after taking a closer look. "Do you think we are after your assets or something? I'm not interested in any inheritance, Mom. You can trust that. We really care about you, Mill." Despite our earnest pleas, Mill coldly snapped at us. "Just get out of here now. Don't come back." Confused and hurt, we left her home in haste. Since then, we've become distant and haven't visited much over the past year. Even as I questioned whether things were okay, it felt like there was no getting through to Mill, who clearly despised our family. Then, Unexpectedly one day, we received a call from my brother-in-law about the first anniversary memorial service for my father-in-law. Hearing that other relatives would attend, we decided to go. However, Mill remained as cold as ever. Afterward, I noticed my husband, John, seemed lost in thought more often. "John, what's on your mind? Is it about Mill?" Oh, yeah. If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know." "It's okay, Sarah. You don't need to worry about anything," my husband said, looking into my concerned eyes and gently caressing my cheek. His warm smile instantly put my heart at ease. About a month passed since then. "All right, I'm off." As he left for a business trip, he cheerfully called out to me and our daughter, Emily. But he quickly returned, saying, "I forgot to give you this," and handed me a lucky charm. "This will surely protect you," my husband said with a tender and heartwarming smile. I truly felt blessed to have married him. However, the next day, a shocking event occurred. He had taken his own life. His car was found on a mountain road near my childhood home, with him inside, foaming at the mouth and lifeless. Though he told me he was on a business trip, his company said there was no trip scheduled that day. Moreover, I learned that just before his passing, my husband had called his brother, Jack, saying, "I can't take it anymore. Living has become too painful. I'm so sorry. I tried my best to stop him, but it came to this." Jack repeatedly bowed his head to me, expressing his remorse. According to the police, traces of a toxic plant were found in his stomach. This plant grows naturally in places like the mountains, and with a little knowledge, it's easily accessible. Ultimately, with Jack's testimony, it was concluded he likely ingested it intending to end his life. I couldn't fathom why this had happened, and deeply blamed myself for not noticing my husband's anguish. Standing before my husband's body, I felt faint, but Jack, my brother-in-law, was there to support me. "Stay strong, Taylor. This is hard on me too. I should have been there more for Ryan. Why did it come to this?" Hugging me, little Emily was also in tears. However, the only person not crying was my Mill, who glared at us with a pale face. Amidst my grief, Jack and Ryan's colleagues took charge and started making funeral arrangements. "Please wake up. I'm begging you." On the day of the funeral, my husband Ryan, lying in the casket, had his usual gentle expression. It feels like if I called out to him, he'd sit right up. Tears streamed down my face as I clung to him. That's when I noticed it. There was a photo placed on Ryan's chest. Who on earth put this photo here? Curiously picking up the photo, I noticed my husband Ryan's face in our family picture was slashed with a cutter. On the back of the photo, the words "Run Now" S were written. What is this? Who could the word "run" possibly be directed to? As chills ran down my spine, I turned around and locked eyes with my Mill, who was glaring coldly at me. No way could it be. As I stared back, she quickly looked away, seemingly flustered. From her behavior, I felt that maybe my Mill knew something. That's the feeling I got. And so, making sure no one noticed, I discreetly tucked the photo into the pocket of my black morning dress. Once the funeral was over and things had settled down a bit, my thoughts returned to that mysterious photo. I still didn't know who placed that picture in the casket. But the S that accompanied the message, could it perhaps be an initial of a name? If that's the case, the only person close to me with an S in their name is Susan. That means it's my Mill. I just couldn't bring myself to believe that my husband would take his own life, leaving me and our daughter behind. I desperately wished to know even a shred of the reason. So I decided to muster up the courage to visit my Mill. Upon reaching her home, she greeted me with her usual cold expression. Unfortunately, my brother-in-law, John, was out for work, so it was just the two of us. What brought you here all of a sudden? Well, I wanted to know any possible reasons for my husband's passing. I thought there might be some clues at his childhood home. I lacked the courage to confront my Mill directly and impulsively lied to her. Trying to find a topic for conversation, my eyes wandered to the large bookshelf filling an entire wall in the living room. This Lauren family had not only novels on their shelves, but also encyclopedias, dictionaries, and such. Among them were several books that my husband, Jack, had read during his student days. Overcome with nostalgia, I found myself picking a few up. At the end of each book was a stamp to indicate ownership. Jack's head and Jay with a cat snuggling next to it. I couldn't help but smile, thinking how typical that was of him. However, I could feel my Mill's icy stare on my back as I continued flipping through the pages. At that moment, I noticed one book still had its dust jacket on. Picking it up, I realized it was a detailed book about poisonous plants. Several pages were marked with sticky notes, and upon checking one, it detailed the very poison that Jack had used. At the end of the book, there was also the familiar stamp indicating it was his. Mill, what is the meaning of this? That is... As I confronted her with the book in hand, my Mill suddenly broke down in tears. It's all my fault. Please forgive me. The truth Mill revealed was beyond shocking. Please, make sure you report to the police. Yes, I understand. So I called the police. Just then, my brother-in-law, Mike, who was oblivious to everything, came home. Noticing the sad expressions on my face and Mill's, he approached with a look of concern. What happened? Seeing you here, Samantha. Is everything okay? Well, I wanted to discuss something about Mill and my husband. I see. It was a tragic event, wasn't it? Samantha, are you feeling a bit better now? As I hesitated, looking down, unable to reveal the truth to Mike, who was, as always, kind and concerned, he began to speak of something unexpected. I know this might not be the best time, but I've always had feelings for you, Samantha. I think Emily is adorable too. Would you consider remarrying with me? I was taken aback by the sudden proposal. I never imagined that Mike had such feelings for me. Thank you, Mike. But I can't think about that right now. Yeah, I understand. Scratching his head awkwardly, Mike said, I'm sorry, with a shy look. I then handed him the photo I had. Seeing the photo of my husband's mutilated face and the words "Run now" on the back, Mike turned pale and gasped. This was inside my husband's coffin. Who would do such a thing? It seems someone who knows the culprit behind my husband's death might have attended the funeral. Hold on a minute. Jacob took his own life. It doesn't make sense to have a culprit. Mike's eyes darted around, seemingly bewildered. But in my dreams, Jacob screams. I was set up by him. I bear a grudge. At my words, Mike's eyes widened, staring at me with a look of pure shock, as if he had seen something terrifying. Also, I found this in the living room bookshelf. I handed him the book on poisonous plants I'd found earlier, pointing out the owner's bookplate inside. It bore the stamp with the letter K, indicating it belonged to Mike, known as Ken in full. What are you trying to say? Are you suggesting I had something to do with my brother's death? I didn't respond to Mike's question and continued speaking. Beside me, my Mill, who had been silently looking down, held her breath and closely watched the unfolding events. Furthermore, please take a look at this. I pulled out an amulet I had received from my husband, and from within, I extracted a single note. Written on it was, "My brother poisoned our father." Losing my husband was heartbreaking, and I clutched the amulet he'd given me throughout the funeral. It was then that I felt something inside and realized there was a note within. Does something like this even count as evidence? Well then, what about this? I pulled out my cell phone and began to play a video. The footage showed a conversation between my husband and his brother, John. In the video, John confessed that he had indeed taken their father's life using poison. Furthermore, he said, "I'm not targeting my brother's family. I'll confess to the police myself." When my husband decided to confront John, he secretly set up a camera in his family home. This was also mentioned in the letter from my husband. The first time I saw this, I was filled with a burning anger. You admitted your guilt to my husband to put his mind at ease. Yet you used poison to take his life, didn't you? David believed in you until the very end. Why would you do something like this? As I confronted him, John's gentle demeanor changed in an instant. He clicked his tongue in annoyance and glared at me with a menacing look. At that moment, Mill burst into tears, letting out a heart-wrenching cry. Why? Why such a cruel act? Mill had confided everything to me earlier. The brothers were very close when they were young. Yet, as time went on, John grew increasingly jealous of his talented younger brother, David. He'd hide or even destroy David's possessions in sneaky acts of spite. Aware of this, the parents had been strict in disciplining John. However, David never blamed John for any of it. He actually looked up to his brother, something that broke Mill's heart. After Phil passed away, while cleaning the bookshelf, she found a book on poisonous plants. My husband was diagnosed with a heart attack, but he'd never shown signs of heart issues before. I knew something was off when I looked at the bookmarks in that book. The symptoms matched perfectly with how my husband had passed. It was truly shocking. Though she hadn't noticed because of the book jacket, John had been intently reading that book on poison plants. Moreover, she found photos of David, his face slashed with a box cutter, tucked within the pages of the book. However, without more concrete evidence, it seemed unlikely John would admit anything when confronted. During the one-week memorial service, we saw John burning our bags when we visited our parents' house, causing considerable shock. That's why Mill had been intentionally cold to us, to keep us away from the family home, fearing for our safety. The pain and worry were etched deep into Mill's face as she shared this, leaving me at a loss for words. Even though we kept our distance, John's demeanor grew even more hostile. He would mutter to himself about doing something about David. That's why during the first anniversary memorial service of my husband's passing, I tried to warn you. Using the photo found in the book on poison plants, I passed a message saying run now. I even whispered that Ken might have had a hand in my husband's demise, but that might have backfired. If my husband had remained oblivious, he wouldn't have sought out John, and this tragedy could have been avoided. Mill deeply regretted and felt everything was her fault. I couldn't find the words to respond. It's all because Dad wouldn't let me take over the company. But David always said he couldn't become the CEO, pushing John forward. How would I know that? Ken, Dad loved you too. David felt the same way, and yet it didn't have to come to this. Now you bring this up. It's the parents' fault for always favoring the younger one and David for playing Mr. Goody Two-Shoes. All of you are to blame. My brother-in-law smirked defiantly, his face twisted in rage. How dare you hurt my beloved husband? I will never forgive you. Shut it. If you hadn't meddled, I would have made you my wife. In his fury, my brother-in-law suddenly pulled out a hidden knife and lunged at me. Panicking, I tried to run, shouting help, but he was too fast and quickly closed the distance. In desperation, as the knife was raised, I instinctively closed my eyes. Just then, there was a loud thud. Someone came from the side and shielded me. It was my Mill. Mill, are you okay? She grimaced, clutching her arm, which was bleeding. Mike, enough is enough. Stop this madness. Please, just turn yourself in. Shut up. I have no choice but to get rid of both of you. You finally became the CEO you always wanted to be. Why are you doing this? I need money. It turns out that while Mike took over the company, just as his Phil predicted, he had no talent in management. In just a year, he racked up a significant debt and desperately needed money. And can you believe it? He had taken out a hefty life insurance policy on his own brother. It's funny, when I told Tony I was going to the police, he believed me so easily. Mike laughed, an ugly, raucous sound. I felt an overwhelming sense of disgust looking at him. But when he said a toast to our parting and I handed him the drink laced with poison, he was cautious not to drink. But he did shake my hand. Little did he know I had poison on it. Remember how Tony had a habit of licking his fingers? Seems like it got to him during the car ride back. Feeling invincible, Mike continued to boast, waving a knife menacingly at us. Your husband, even after all that, still wanted to save you. Why couldn't you understand his feelings? How should I know? It's all the family's fault for always treating Tony like he was special. Just then, the police we had called earlier arrived on the scene. Mike kept pleading until the end, I didn't do anything wrong. Please forgive me. Let me go. People like you should go straight to hell." Caught off guard by my outburst, Mike finally quieted down and was taken away by the police. Thankfully, my Mill's injuries weren't severe. In the end, with no signs of remorse from Mike, it's unlikely he'll ever be released from prison. I'm currently living with my Mill in her family home. She's returned to her old kind self and adores my daughter, and we're living a happy life. Moreover, there was more written in the letter inside the charm. "Sarah is my treasure. I've always loved her. Holding on to my husband's feelings, I'm determined to keep on living."